So, good morning to everyone that's joining us from Australia, and good evening to our colleagues and our investors that are tuning in from the United States and abroad. We appreciate your time, and I want to welcome you to the BlinkLab Investor Webinar. I'm Jane Morgan, a non-executive director, and we're here to discuss the results of BlinkLab's recently completed US pilot study for its smartphone-based diagnostics platform for autism, and to outline how these results position the company for its upcoming FDA pivotal trial. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Henk-Jan Boele, our Chief Executive Officer, and Mr. Brian Leedman, who is our Chairman. Hank, I'm going to hand over to you to just take us through the key findings from the pilot study and what this means for BlinkLab's next phase of growth.
Hi, thank you, Jane, and welcome everyone. So last week, BlinkLab achieved basically two major milestones. First of all, we completed our US pilot study of the DX1 device. So in total, we recruited 485 kids across the US, and we did this in very close collaboration with Primed and North Shore. So what were the results? The overall sensitivity we achieved was 83.7%, and the overall specificity was 84.7% for the BlinkLab DX1 device. And this is relative to clinical expert diagnosis. I would say that these results are outstanding, especially when you take into account the design of the study. So what we did, we intentionally created what we here call in the office the ultimate stress test for the technology. So what that means is that we basically included a real-world population of children with a very broad range of developmental challenges. Often symptoms were overlapping with autism. There were cases that had co-occurring conditions such as autism or such as ADHD, many cases actually. Global developmental delays, speech delays, and many others. And also many of the children in our study had very mild or even subthreshold autism presentations. And these are absolutely the cases that are the hardest to classify, even for very experienced clinicians. And that was also because of the age range in our study. Kids that are diagnosed at an older age are inherently less severe. Again, in this sample, we achieved an overall accuracy of larger than 84%. And what that shows us is that the BlinkLab technology not only works in the ideal clinical setting, in a clean sample with profoundly autistic kids versus neurotypical kids, but also in a very complex, heterogeneous sample, which is basically the everyday reality of pediatric assessments. Compared to the earlier study that we did in Morocco, which was mainly focused on kids that were more profound with autism, this pilot study really pushed the limits of the technology. It was the ultimate stress test, and it passed it. And we are now further exploring and investigating correlations between our device output, autism severity levels. And also what was not in the announcement was the fact that the specificity in the more severe cases even went up all the way to 89%. I would really like to compliment my fantastic team. Hundreds, if not 1,000 hours of data collection, data annotation, refinement of the model. Absolutely a fantastic job. The second milestone, actually, just the day before the unblinding, unblinding happened on Friday. And on Thursday, we had a formal meeting, a second meeting actually, with the FDA in the US, which was a very productive meeting where basically the agency endorsed our pivotal 510(k) study design. The most important things from this meeting was that the FDA confirmed with us that a minimum threshold of greater than 65% for both sensitivity and specificity would meet the expectations for regulatory clearance. And keep in mind that our pilot results already exceed that benchmark. Of course, we cannot promise FDA clearance, but at least we can give ourselves here at BlinkLab, but also you, the highest level of confidence that we will succeed. And the whole thing of the pilot study was that we were avoiding risk Be always so predictable. And I think that's also really important for investors to make the best investment decisions. Also, with the FDA during the meeting, we agreed that a streamlined version of the pivotal study was approved. So basically, we went from 1,000 participants to 528 participants. And this is also important to mention because it will reduce both the duration of the study and, of course, also the cost. One final thing I want to touch upon is the final section in the announcement, which kind of talks about new ways to capture autism behaviors using during our 15-minute BlinkLab DX1 assessment. And it's kind of a sneak peek into the BlinkLab kitchen here. Essentially, what we did, we identified new ways to look at our data. So we discovered that one should not only look at how often a specific behavior takes place, for instance, a specific type of vocalization or a specific blink, but one should also look at how similar this behavior is to previous occurrences of that behavior, and also when it happens, for instance, at the start or at the end of the 15-minute session. So one of these already has been incorporated in the DX1 model, but more will be released soon to even further push the diagnostic accuracy. So normally here the office is empty now. There's a bunch of really smart cookies here from all over the world, fantastic data science, clinical scientists, software developers, and we keep pushing our product forward every single day since we believe that it is important to transform pediatric developmental care. Long story, in short, our study basically confirms that the DX1 device is ready for the next stage. It's absolutely a step closer to bringing more objectivity to a process that has long relied on subjective interpretations. Our mission remains very clear: early, accurate, accessible diagnosis for autism anywhere, in specialist offices, but also in pediatric offices, community settings, at home, and so on. I would like to thank all the participating families in the study, all the kids that participated, of course, the excellent clinicians at Pri-Med and North Shore, and the investors, of course, and the amazing team. I mean, for the last few days, it was hectic here in the office. Thanks again. I'm happy to take any questions, but I will first now pass on the word to our great chairman, Mr. Leedman.
Well, thank you, Hank, and thank you to everyone for joining us today. What we've seen from this pilot study is more than just strong readout from data. It's also a validation of our vision. BlinkLab isn't simply building a diagnostic product. We're building a platform that brings together neuroscience, AI, and smart technology to objectively measure behavior and cognition. Not just for autism, but also for a range of neurodevelopmental and neurological conditions that affect millions of children worldwide. Behind this platform is an extraordinary amount of work. Our developers writing thousands of lines of code, our engineers refining every camera and every signal processing feature that a clinical team dedicated months to data collection, annotation, and analysis. This is what gives BlinkLab its edge. It's not just an app, it's a clinically developed and validated AI-driven ecosystem ready to transform how the brain and behavior are assessed. From an investor perspective, this means that we're not just a single product story. We're developing a scalable diagnostic engine, one that can extend well beyond autism and related conditions such as ADHD, anxiety, and development coordination disorders. This positions BlinkLab at the forefront of one of the most fastest growing sectors in digital health. As chairman, I couldn't be more confident in our team, our technology, and our trajectory. We have regulatory clarity, strong data, and a platform to build for expansion. Our focus now is on execution, completing the pivotal study, achieving FDA clearance, and delivering sustainable value to our shareholders. BlinkLab's mission is ambitious but clear: to transform how neurodevelopment conditions are understood and diagnosed, and in doing so, to create lasting value for both companies, for both families and investors. Again, I would like to congratulate Hank and his team for achieving these amazing results.
Thank you, gentlemen. Yes, as you can see, Brian is caught in the Qantas lounge, but hopefully we could hear all that presentation. But I want to thank you guys for shedding some light on this morning's announcements. Obviously, very exciting times for us at BlinkLab and even the scientific community at large, I guess, when it comes to these conditions, how we understand them and how we reach a diagnosis. I'm going to turn to some questions now from investors and the community who might be interested in learning a little bit more. And for those online, please be sure to use the Q&A function, which can be found at the bottom of your Zoom window. I'll kick things off to start as they start coming through. So as you've explained, the pilot study achieved strong accuracy in a very broad population. So Henk, can you explain on what made this trial design so challenging and any interesting examples of those challenges or how we overcame them?
Yeah, I think this question really gets to the heart of what makes our study unique. What I said, it is the ultimate stress test for the BlinkLab DX1 device. So we intentionally did not focus on that clear-cut autism cases, but we worked with what we call real-world clinical populations. All kind of overlapping disorders, all kind of overlapping developmental concerns, ADHD, speech delays, anxiety, learning difficulties, global developmental delays, etc. Also important to mention was that I think it's over 90% of the data that was collected in the home environment, so not in a clinical setting, but at home, which obviously brings very unique, but also sometimes very funny challenges. We overcame the at-home testing, of course, by making the app as robust as possible, by closely always monitoring what's going on the background noise, the light, phone position, movements of the phone. Extremely important to monitor that data to make for the quality control of the device of the data. Also, of course, we partnered with very experienced clinical centers in the US, Primate and North Shore. And I think that was kind of how we overcame those challenges. And the fact that the model remained over 83% sensitive specificity, despite the fact that it was such a complex design, it gives me at least a lot of confidence that we're also going to do a really good job for the 510K study.
Thanks, Hank. I guess following on from that as well, then, how does this kind of real world population, prepare the company for the pivotal 510K trial? And what have we learnt? What did we learn that improves the next phase?
Well, we did the trial in the first place with the intention to mirror, of course, the environment that we expect for the 510K trial. For the 510K, we will also have diverse clinical settings, of course, more variable symptom profiles like we had right now, and also the typical operational challenges that we faced in this study will also be we'll also be facing the same challenges in the 510K study. We learned a lot about participant engagement, of course, particularly how to streamline the recruitment. Keep in mind, by the way, that the initial plan for this pilot study was to recruit only 100 kids. But then after a few hiccups in the recruitment, the recruitment really took off. And in the end, we almost recruited 500 kids in just over 7 months. So extremely important learnings also for the 510K study. Also important to mention is that we optimized all data pre-processing steps, the whole data annotation pipeline, and of course, the platform to enable large-scale data handling and behavioral assessments quickly and securely as well.
Actually, I'd like to also add, Hank, that this 480 odd kids that we've recruited was only made through 2 participating clinics in North America. We're now targeting a pretty similar number for the main trial, and we already have 7 major clinics already signed up. So what that will do to the recruitment, mate, I'd imagine it will be far stronger. We'll see how it goes, but certainly we expect that we'll be most definitely on track for regulatory submission on the back of good data by next year.
Gentlemen, so straightforward question here, following on from that. Do you expect the population in 510K in the 510K pivotal study to be similar to the pilot, or how will it differ?
Well, it will be very similar in concept. I mean, we are maintaining this broad range of clinical, developmental concerns. So that's a key requirement for FDA clearance. What's important to mention, though, is that, as Brian already was pointing out, for the 510K trial, we will be working with leading top-tier hospitals in the US. Cincinnati, Seattle, UPenn, Vanderbilt. And we know already that these hospitals have a slightly more structured and also controlled recruitment strategies, also for, let's say, non-autistic participants. And of course, it's important that in the FDA study, it's that we ensure basically the global representation of the US. Important to mention, of course, age, sex, race, ethnicity, etc.
Thank you. Just one on the main study. So you've already onboarded 7 centers in the US. Can you comment on the quality of these sites and what feedback do you get from the clinicians at these
Well, of course, I mean, we are very proud of the quality of these participating sites. I mean, the fact that these hospitals want to participate in this study is, I mean, a great compliment for me, but for the whole BlinkLab team. I mean, these centers have a long experience with clinical trials. What's also important to mention, we're asking about clinician feedback. Very positive, I would say. So what I've learned is that they really appreciate the fact that the BlinkLab tech focuses on sensory sensitivity, since this is often way harder to assess than social autism symptoms. I would argue that when it comes to social symptoms of autism, you don't really need advanced technology. I mean, after all, we are humans and we are social animals, and we naturally kind of pick up on social cues. For sensory, however, it's way more complicated. It's a completely different story. It's way more harder to observe and to quantify, also for experienced clinicians. And I think that's exactly there where our tech can make a real difference. At least that's what the clinicians are telling us. They view the product not as a simple diagnostic aid, but as a real diagnostic tool that is quantifying sensory processing. It's essentially a window into the brain. And that enthusiasm from the clinicians at the participating sites gives us, of course, here at BlinkLab, a tremendous confidence that we are working on something that's really important and that also really motivates me and the rest of the team.
Thank you, Hank. Quite a few coming through. So, in the past feasibility study and the current pilot, you identified a few new biomarkers, which you mentioned will be part of the final model. So, just to expand on that briefly, why are these features important, and how do they differentiate BlinkLab DX1 from existing FDA-cleared devices like Cognia or EarlPoint, which you mentioned in the announcement, actually?
Yeah, thank you. I think I already touched upon that, but I think that's really where BlinkLab stands apart, focusing on the sensory sensitivity. Most FDA-cleared tools like Cognoa, EarlyPoint, EarlyTech, they focus primarily on social engagement or eye gaze. Our technology measures those too, but we go way further. So what I was mentioning in the announcement is the fact that we are now also identifying markers that are related to what is called restrictive and repetitive behaviors, commonly referred to as RRBs by autism clinicians. And these, for instance, they include repetitive vocal patterns or repetitive movement patterns or repetitive hand movements. And it's important to mention that these are core DSM-5, which is kind of the holy Bible of psychiatry, DSM-5 criteria for autism, but they have been largely overlooked or maybe even ignored by current diagnostic digital tools, and mainly because they're very hard to quantify objectively. And that's exactly where BlinkLab stands out. We have just started incorporating these RRBs features in our model, and it will give clinicians a more complete neurobehavioral profile. And we kind of know already that it improves the accuracy, the diagnostic accuracy. But it also increases the way you interpret the data. It's important that clinicians understand why the model is making specific decisions, that the model is not just a black box and that spits out a number, but it's important for clinicians to understand the technology and why the model makes certain decisions. This is important, of course, for regulatory approval, but it's even more important for clinical adoption and clinical acceptance later down the road.
Thank you, Hank. There's a lot coming through it and a lot of bit of double ups. There's one here. So for the 510K trial, will the clinical reference diagnosis be one doctor or multiple doctors? And could this potentially improve results on the very borderline cases?
Thank you. That's a great question. It was part of the announcement. I took it out. Yes, so we also discussed that extensively with FDA. There will always be multiple doctors involved. Actually, we have a great pipeline where there's at least 2 on-site clinicians that have to agree. If one of them is uncertain or disagrees, I have to think out there, then the case will be reviewed by an external off-site independent clinician that makes an independent judgment on the autism case, independent from the on-site clinicians. And why are we doing this? Well, this is extremely important because, as you probably know, autism assessments are inherently subjective, and the ground truth is therefore sometimes a little bit shaky. It's not it's not the gold standard, and we are trying to make it more gold. We're trying to basically remove uncertainty by always having multiple clinicians involved in the diagnostic assessments of the children.
Thank you, Hank. We're running slightly out of time, and I might move to Brian for this one. The question is, well, great result on the pilot and moving towards, FDA. What else is in the pipeline?
Well, thanks. So we've got a lot of activities going on in terms of the pipeline. I mean, we've got the European ADHD study for one. The ADHD study really excites me because the market for that, I think, is going to be at least 5 times bigger than just autism alone. So that study is an exciting one that we'll be progressing. We've also got the adult autism study. We've already partnered with the University of Amsterdam. We have an Alzheimer and dementia study with Erasmus University, also in the Netherlands, and then a magnet study at Monash University in Melbourne, which is not one that we've talked too much about, but one that's going to get a lot more focus going forward as that big study ramps up. So it's not just autism in children for us. There's a whole pipeline of new products that we're in development. I think we've got a complete platform technology that is very robust, and I expect there'll be a lot more exciting news to follow in the course of the next 12 months.
Wonderful. Well, gentlemen, that's all we've actually got time for today. And I think we have captured the majority of the questions. Should we have missed any of your questions, though, please feel free to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of our ASX releases. But thank you again for joining us for our webinar.